Fujian province on the southeastern coast of China. A land of stunning beauty, where lakes, rivers, fields, and mountains gently intermingle. Not to mention the magnificent Ui Mountains arcing across the northwest, along the border with Jiangxi, which is where we'll start exploring Fujian, taking to the skies from this towering range on a journey that will introduce us to the legend of a leaf, an old village with a very prosperous past behind it. A journey that will offer a new perspective on the outlandish outcrops of the Dansha landform and reveal the stunning beauty of terraced fields covered in lotus flowers. The Tongmuguan Fault, a V-shaped canyon and natural chasm, marks the boundary between Fujian and Jiangxi. Flying south, we enter the Ui Mountains. Our journey into Fujian has begun. Compared with other forested areas on the same latitude, the woods of the Ui Mountains have much in common with the jungles of subtropical regions, which is why they have such an amazing biodiversity. Warm and humid, teeming with insects, these green valleys provide ideal conditions for an amazing variety of amphibians, reptiles, and birds. Here there's a calmness, a slowness to the pace of life, just as nature intended. Everything seems to take its time in the Ui Mountains, even rivers and streams. This is Jiuchu Stream. Before it hits the Ui Mountains, it's an urgent, fast-flowing stream, but then it slows down, casually winding its way through the hills. Maybe it's taking in the scenery too. In 1183, Zhu Xi, a Southern Song Dynasty neo-Confucianist, returned to the Ui Mountains after resigning his government post. He came here to the fifth bend of the Jiuchu Stream to start an academy, write books, and pass on his ideas to his disciples. Zhu Xi once went upstream alongside it and wrote down a fisherman's song, Jiao-style poetry of Jiuchu. Maybe nothing sums up the Ui landscape more than the Unu Peak towering over the banks of the Jiuchu Stream. Indeed, Zhu Xi once wrote a poem about it, in which he likened the majestic pillar to a woman. Slim and graceful stands Unu Peak at the second bend of the stream, with flowers on her head, water lapping at her feet. I wonder who she waits to meet. The Ui Mountains are rich in tea. Flying over the mountains, tea bushes are everywhere. Between April and May is the busiest time of the year for the Ui Mountain tea growers. Crossing the Tongmuguan Fault, you can spy an old winding mountain pathway, the Mingan Path. Following it takes you to a tiny village hidden deep in the canyon. It's called Tongmu, and it's been famous for the quality of its tea ever since the Song Dynasty. As Lu Yu wrote in the Book of Tea, way back in the Tang Dynasty, the best tea trees grow out of weathered stones, only high up in the hills, exposed to precisely the right combination of elements, can truly superb teas flourish. In other words, only in places like mist-shrouded Tongmu, with its rocky soil bursting with minerals. It's said the world-famous Lapsang Souchong tea originates from here. Indeed, according to locals, only tea grown around Tongmuguan Fault can be said to be authentic Lapsang Souchong. This village, cocooned by mountains and surrounded by crystal clear waters, is called Shamei. 200 years ago, this place was the biggest tea trading market in North Fujian. In fact, this stream, the Dong, was originally dug to transport the region's tea. People say that back then, when the tea season was at its height, you couldn't see the surface of the Dong because of all the tea-laden bamboo rafts on it. Once through the Dong, the tea would be carried up the Mingan Path. From there, it would go up the Ganjiang River to the Yangtze River to be transported in overland caravans to the Yellow River and on to central China and the world beyond. Taining County's UNESCO Global Geopark, home to some of the world's most gorgeous scenery, the Dansha landform, seismically active because of the interaction between the Pacific Plate and the Eurasia Plate. Hundreds of millions of years ago, a combination of movements in the Earth's crust and volcanic eruptions resulted in the formation of the Red Taining Basin. Later, elevated by the same tectonic shifts that created the Himalayas, weathered and eroded by the action of running water over millions of years, the natural wonder came into being. The terraced fields in Jianning County are situated at the foot of Mount Jinnao, overlooking the Jinshi Valley. The lotus flowers planted in these fields tier upon tier are grown, not for their roots, but their seeds. It's said that lotus seeds produced in Jianning were once given in tribute to the imperial household. Indeed, Jianning lotus seed with red date soup is mentioned in the Chinese novel Dream of the Red Chamber, a drink that hero Jia Bao-yu must have every day. Jianning has a 1,000-year history of planting lotus flowers. Every year these terraces produce some 4,000 tons of pure white lotus seeds. Over the Ui Mountains, it's now time to explore the Fujian hinterland, a land of intricate squares and circles, of curious earthen buildings. It's a place of sadness too, especially the homeland of the Hakkas, with their magnificent red brick houses full of long-forgotten memories. Longyan, home to an old community of Hakkas. Yongding is home to a famous type of traditional architecture called the Tulo, or earthen building. The Chengqi building is the most famous of them. It took almost 80 years to complete the Chengqi building. South-facing, spaced out in 3 concentric rings, like the inside of a tree trunk, the ancestral hall stands in the center. Covering over 5,000 square meters with 400 rooms, at its peak, this place was home to 600 people. The couplets on the gate proclaim, carrying forward the hard-working and thrifty virtues of our ancestors, encouraging our descendants to be diligent in study and work. Moving on to Nanjing County, shrouded in cloud and mist, we glimpse a cluster of tulos. More than 40 of these earthen buildings of various shapes stand at the foot of the mountain. Divided in two by the S-shaped stream, Tasha village looks a bit like the yin-yang sign, the two lows serving as the dots. The oldest tulo here has a history of about 400 years. These wonderful buildings really come into their own during spring and autumn, when people gather together to remember their ancestors, how they came here from far away and transformed this barren place into a wonderland dotted with these amazing buildings. Generally thought of as round, many tulos are in fact rectangular. This cluster has both. The 5 buildings were laid out according to the ancient principles of feng shui. They're well spaced out and take into account the undulating slope of the mountain. As well as being picturesque, these tulos are functional, comfortable places to live. This is the Huagui building, the tallest rectangular tulo in Fujian. What makes it different is that we can't see its foundation. Built in a marsh, it's supported by over 200 pine piles. Not the best place for such a building, you might have thought. 286 years on, it's still standing, as solid and stable as ever. This tranquil spot, this blessed plot between heaven and earth, this is where the Hakka people chose to settle down. Tulos were originally built because they were easy to defend, providing security for the whole clan. With the ancestral hall at the center, the tulo complex is composed of concentric rings. Here, throughout their everyday lives, whatever they are doing, people are never far away from their ancestors. The first floor is the kitchen. The second floor is used to store grain. And the third floor and above is where people live. Born in the same family, all close relatives, living under one roof in harmony. The couplets hanging inside the Chengqi building say it all. One clan living together, each taking care of the other. Timeless values that the Hakka people have lived by for generations. Values that have ensured their survival through years of war and chaos, exile and wandering. Values of togetherness and community beautifully expressed in these wonderful buildings. On the 15th day of the first lunar month, the Dragon Parade starts in Liancheng County's Gutian town. Each year, a single family is given the honor of making the head and tail of the dragon. The other parts of the dragon are made by the rest of the town. The result is a very impressive dragon indeed. Sometimes almost a kilometer long. Shubi village is one of the ancestral homes of the Hakkas. According to the history books, the first Hakkas came here from the Central Plains in the late Western Jin dynasty, more than 1,500 years ago. Over the centuries, this land gradually became home to these wanderers from afar. Today, right across China, indeed right across the world, there are more than 120 million Hakka people, many of whom are able to trace their lineage right back to this humble village, Shubi. In 1995, the Hakka Ancestral Hall was built here, providing a spiritual focal point for Hakkas the world over. Contrasting with the gray brick residences built elsewhere in China in ancient times, these ancient red brick houses add even more color to the landscape of southern Fujian. They are in Daimei, a village completely surrounded by water. Constructed more than 500 years ago, each of the 276 ancient red brick houses has exactly the same structure. It's said that the founder of Daimei village was Chen Chuan, a Neo-Confucianist in the southern Song dynasty who advocated living in harmony with nature. The roof beams of the houses have an interesting feature. They cock up and split into two at the ends, a bit like the tail of a swallow, hence their name, Swallowtail Ridges. Amazingly, despite the tumults of hundreds of years, including earthquakes and wars, these houses are still standing, almost as good as new. Next, we'll fly all the way north over the mountains of mid-Fujian to see another side to this wonderful province. A blue world, very different from the green mountains and hillsides. We'll also be on a journey through time, flying to an ancient town with a 1,000-year history to experience a unique lion dance, then over the mountains and down to the sea. Flying through the clouds and mist, we arrive at Huatong Town. 1,300 years ago, villages began to take shape in this place. More than 60 houses in the town, with black bricks and gray tiles, were constructed in the Ming and Qing dynasties. The Chinese lion dance is world famous. But while most people are familiar with the conventional version, fewer people know about the Huatong version. Instead of being performed by people, this one uses puppets. The lions come in different sizes, the big ones weighing over 30 kilograms, the small ones 18 kilograms. Connected to these strings, it's almost as if they have their very own nervous system that enables them to do everything these lions are supposed to do. Sit, squat, shake heads, play beads, even spit fire. All thanks to these energetic puppeteers, whose magic literally brings the lions to life. In 2006, Huatong String Lion Dance was listed as a National Intangible Cultural Heritage. Mount Taimu, with its strange time-smoothed stones, is a mute masterpiece, carved by nature over countless eons. According to the scientists, 100 million years ago, thanks to tectonic movements, the Earth's crust split here, filling with molten rock that cooled into granite. Later still, the Earth's plates moved again, lifting up the ocean floor, Mount Taimu rising out of the sea. grass, hills, sea. This place seems to have it all. Its own miniature world in one. With its long twisting coastline and countless estuaries, Fujian has a very special relationship with the sea. Shapu. Sha means beautiful clouds, and Pu means estuary. The annual average temperature here is about 20 degrees Celsius. Fed by the constant supply of fresh water flowing down the river, there isn't too much salt in these waters. The ideal environment for a crop that has been extensively produced ever since the 1950s, kelp and laver. In fact, 20% of China's kelp and laver comes from Shapu. For anybody with an eye for beauty, every minute, every second spent here is priceless. The next leg of our journey takes us even further south to Fujian's biggest island. Following the river upstream, once again we go back in time to explore the past and present of a 1,000-year-old port. Then it's on to a place that nurtured many significant figures in the history of this country, finishing up in the stunning natural beauty of Fuzhou. Pingtan Island, also known as Haitan Island, the largest island in Fujian province, over 120 kilometers away from Fuzhou City, and just 68 nautical miles from Hsinchu in Taiwan. Dubbed as China's Marine Abrasion Landform Museum, it has the stones on the island as its exhibits. Pingtan Bay is a very windy place. For almost half the year, gale-forced winds blow here. Keeping the wind out of their houses has always been a challenge for the people of Beigong village, which is why they build their houses out of heavy wind-resistant granite. To the northwestern part of the island, two giant granite stones stand in the boundless sea. With their shapes looking like sails, they're dubbed the double sail stones. In the past, people could only travel between Fuzhou and Pingtan by boat. That began to change in 2010 with the building of the Pingtan Cross-Strait Bridge. 3 years later, in November of 2013, cross-strait communications received another boost when the construction of the Pingtan Cross-Strait Highway and Railway dual-purpose bridge got underway. With force 7 winds blowing for more than 200 days a year, battered by waves of up to 9 meters, building a bridge across the strait was an awesome achievement. which is why the engineers who created it had devised new innovative construction methods to make possible what many thought was impossible. To this end, these intrepid bridge builders commissioned a floating crane capable of lifting heavier loads higher than any similar vessel in the country. Almost 17 kilometers long, this is the longest cross-sea highway and railway dual-purpose bridge in the world. When it opens to traffic, it will be possible to get from Pingtan to Fuzhou in just half an hour. Standing in the estuary of the Minjiang River is the Luoxing Pagoda, once known as China Pagoda. Sighting it from afar, foreign sailors would know that China was the next port of call. Over 150 years ago, Ma Wei gave birth to China's first modern shipyard and naval academy. It was here that modern China's dream of using modern sea power to defend itself first took shape. Sadly, these early efforts came to little. In 1884, a French squadron sailed up the estuary of the Minjiang River. Despite the stubborn resistance put up by the fledgling modern Chinese Navy, it proved impossible to stave off the invasion. Ma Wei's hopes of leading the rejuvenating of the Qing dynasty naval power disappeared beneath the waves under the silent gaze of Luoxing Pagoda. Zhongjiao Island was once a sandbank on the Minjiang River. After opening up of the treaty ports in the 19th century, the island became host to many foreign consulates, churches, and hospitals. At the end of the 19th century, the Qing government set up the Fuzhou Native Customs of the Fujian Customs, taking charge of the management of foreign trade and the collection of tariffs. Amid the concrete jungle that is modern-day Fuzhou, you can still find plenty of examples of the old, time-honored architectural styles. 3 lanes and 7 alleys are located in the middle of Fuzhou. Starting in the Jin Dynasty, maturing in the Tang and Five Dynasties period, by the Ming and Qing dynasties, this was where anybody who was anybody wanted to live. Starting from Nanhao Street, going north to south, there are 3 lanes in the west and 7 alleys to the east. This tightly knit, intricate tangle of alleyways is home to over 200 ancient buildings, leading some to dub it a living fossil of the Chinese-built environment. It was home to a number of famous figures in Chinese history, including Lin Zexu, who led the campaign to suppress opium in the late Qing dynasty, and Yan Fu, the greatest Enlightenment thinker in modern Chinese history. But Fuzhou's 2,200 years of history isn't only to be seen in Fuzhou's ancient relics. Some of it is still very much alive. The history of banyan trees in Fuzhou dates back to the Tang Dynasty, with its heyday in the Northern Song Dynasty. Back then, local officials encouraged tree planting, its chief advocate being Zheng Bo-yu, then magistrate of Fuzhou. One tree does not make a forest, except for the banyan tree. Once it's fully grown, being beneath one is like being in a small forest. They live for a long time, too. This big banyan tree is nearly 1,000 years old, with its trunk measuring 3 meters in diameter, as wide as 6 people, arms outstretched, holding hands in a circle. And it's big enough to provide shade for almost 1,000 people. No wonder it's dubbed Fuzhou's #1 banyan tree. Because of the abundance of these trees, Fuzhou has been dubbed the city of banyan trees. Next, it's time to head for the hometown of a very special lady, the goddess Ma Zu. It's a journey that will lead us to the beginning of the maritime Silk Road, to a meeting place of diverse cultures, to a city renowned for a fragrant product with special spiritual significance, incense. Meizhou Island is less than 10 kilometers long and 1.3 kilometers wide. Despite its small size, this is a holy land to millions of devotees of Ma Zu worldwide. The more than 5,000 Ma Zu temples around the globe can all trace their origins back to this island. Born in the 10th century and growing up on Meizhou Island, Ma Zu was born Lin Mo. Upright and moral, she died at the age of 28, rescuing someone at sea. Over the past 1,000 years, 14 emperors had conferred noble titles on her. As time passed by, in the minds of the people here, Ma Zu gradually transformed into a sea goddess. In 2009, the Ma Zu belief and customs was listed as a World Intangible Cultural Heritage. Now we continue our flight southwards along the coast, bringing us to Liusheng Pagoda in Quanzhou Bay. Liusheng Pagoda was built in the Song Dynasty. As well as being a Buddhist pagoda, it also played a role in the prosperity of this maritime port, helping guide sailors safely into port for centuries. In the Song and Yuan dynasties, Quanzhou was always regarded as the starting point for any overseas expedition. Distances from China to foreign countries were always calculated in terms of distance from Quanzhou. In those days, Quanzhou was literally China's gateway to the world. Quanzhou Port has existed for more than 1,300 years. Each year, when commercial ships were about to go to sea, government officials would come to Mount Zhouru to pray for northwesterly winds to speed them on their way in autumn, and southeasterlies to bring them safely home in spring and summer. Over 800 years ago, this thriving trading port was a forest of sails and masts. Anping Bridge is 2,255 meters long and 3.8 meters wide. All granite with 361 piers. It's the longest ancient stone bridge still in existence. Huang Hu, a merchant prince who initiated the construction of the bridge, became the richest man in Anping through foreign trade. When Huang Hu first suggested building the Anping Bridge in 1138, Quanzhou port was booming. People from all over the world set foot on this bridge. Traders from India, Arab merchants, people from Vietnam, Africa, even Europe, all flocked here for tea, porcelain, silk, and spices. Quanzhou West Street began flourishing in the early Ming Dynasty. Today, it's still as bustling as ever. Kaiyuan Temple was constructed in the Tang Dynasty and has a history of over 1,300 years. Tested by earthquakes and typhoons, the two stone pagodas of the Song Dynasty inside the temple are still standing tall today, enduring symbols of ancient Quanzhou. In ancient times, this was a Buddhist realm, its streets thronging with saints and holy men. So said Zhu Xi, Southern Song Neo-Confucian thinker. To this day, this couplet, written by Master Hong Yi, an eminent monk, still hangs in the Hall of Heavenly Kings in the Kaiyuan Temple. Not far away from Kaiyuan Temple is Qingjing Mosque, one of the oldest mosques in China, built in 1009 by Muslim Arab merchants. Built in imitation of a mosque in Damascus, Syria, in 1604, the huge dome above the hall was destroyed in an earthquake. 400 years later, in 2007, the Sultanate of Oman donated money to rebuild it. In the Yuan dynasty, the number of countries and regions having trade relations with Quanzhou port reached nearly 100. Indeed, such was the city's diversity that Marco Polo praised Quanzhou as a city of light. Yongchuan County, possibly the most fragrant place on earth. That's because about a quarter of the country's incense is produced here. In the late Ming and early Qing period, the descendants of a merchant of Arab descent named Pu came to Yongchuan from Quanzhou to escape turmoil in the city, bringing with them something that has brought prosperity to the county ever since: the know-how to make incense. Today, the descendants of the Pu family still live here, carrying forward the craftsmanship for which they have long been famed. Before the Ming Dynasty, this rock sculpture was part of a magnificent Taoist temple. Later, the temple burned down. The statue is all that remains. Carved from a huge boulder, Lao Zua has been gazing down at the city before him, alone, for more than 1,000 years, witnessing many changes. Not least the transformation of Quanzhou into the most open, vibrant, and prosperous city in the country. Enjoying a golden age that lasted until 1492, the year Columbus reached America, when Ming Dynasty Emperor Hong Wu imposed a ban on maritime trade between China and the rest of the world. We'll kick off the last stage of our journey with a trip to a seaside city with a very romantic style. Then to the birthplace of an overseas Chinese for an insight into the source of his patriotism. Finishing off at an Ocean Gate terminal that offers the city a bright future as a prosperous port. Yan'u Bridge in Xiamen, the perfect place to perform a miracle, to find out what it's like to drive on water. Just 5 meters above sea level at its lowest point. Driving over this bridge really does feel like you're skimming over the waves. Behind the bridge is the Xiamao Straits Towers, also called the Twin Towers. The Twin Towers standing tall in Xiamen's old quarter have become modern landmarks. It's said that each floor of the towers was completed in only 4 days. People come here to experience something that will definitely get the heart racing. Walking in the clouds, 300 meters up in the air. A city full of vitality just below their feet. Xiamen is also called Ludao Island because it's where egrets nested in ancient times. It's a very different place today. A young city living life at a fast pace. But some things never change. It still has its sense of romance, its old world charm. Zhongshan Road, a very well-known street. Many cities in China has one. These Zhongshan roads are mostly in the center of their cities, and many of them were named in the 1920s and 1930s. The Zhongshan Road in Xiamen is the oldest commercial street in the city. With a length of 1.2 kilometers, it leads down to the sea. Gulangyu Island is only separated from Xiamen by a 600-meter-wide Lujiang River. A small island of less than 2 square kilometers plays host to nearly 100 villas scattered across it. The design of the red dome of the Bagua building resembles that of a traditional mosque. Shuzhuang Garden was built in 1913. As a coastal garden, seawater is integral to its design. Sunlight Rock, also known as Huang Rock, is the highest point on Gulangyu Island. Almost all ships coming in and going out of Xiamen Port are able to see the statue of Zheng Chenggong when they pass Gulangyu Island. In 1641, Zheng Chenggong stationed troops here. The commander who wished to overthrow the Qing dynasty so he could restore the Ming dynasty put this place under the administration of Suaming district, meaning to have the Ming dynasty in mind. During the late Qing and the Republican era, this place became one of China's foreign concessions, home to consulates of more than a dozen countries. On the 8th of July 2017, Gulangyu, a historic international settlement, was listed as a World Heritage Site. Flying northward across the sea from Xiamen Island, we arrive at Jimei School Village. In 1913, Chen Jiagung, who started his business in Singapore, founded Jimei Primary School in his hometown. Altogether, he established 17 schools, one after another, in his homeland, including kindergartens, high schools, and colleges. That's why this place is called Jimei School Village. Chen Jiagang would go on to found Xiamen University. Chen Jiagang altogether founded and financed 118 schools at home and abroad. Today, there are still more than 100,000 people studying in these schools. To this day, Chen Jiagang is still respectively referred to here as Master. In fact, his reputation has even reached the stars. Somewhere out there, there's an asteroid called Chen Jiagang, a fitting tribute to this star of education. A giant freighter is about to reach port. As it does, the empty port springs to life. Luckily, this port is almost entirely controlled by computers. Here, loading and unloading can get underway seamlessly. This is not science fiction, but a real scene at Xiamen Ocean Gate Container Terminal. What makes all of these possible is artificial intelligence. People in the industry humorously call the wharf Ghost Terminal. Because of Xiamen Ocean Gate Container Terminal, it's been possible to make energy savings of 25% and improve productivity by 20%, all with 70% fewer workers. In the past, sailboats set off from here, marking the beginning of a glorious era in maritime trade. Today, the Maritime Silk Road is about to herald the arrival of a new golden age, linking Fujian to the rest of the world.